Texas women's basketball looks to survive and advance against Maryland. A Red River rivalry showdown out on the baseball diamond. And the chaos of the NBA trade deadline. All that and more coming up on College Press Box. Welcome into another episode of College Press Box on this Monday night. Thank you for joining us. I'm your host, Adam Ogburn. We have a loaded episode today, but it's March. So we have to start out on the basketball court. The Texas women's team faced a tall task on Sunday night as the 6-seed Longhorns took on the 2nd-seeded Maryland Terrapins with an Elite Eight berth on the line. Let's take a look at the highlights. Maryland and Texas. Maryland getting off to a perfect start. Katie Benton from the corner nails the three to get the Terrapins off and running. And then a nice feed here inside. Chloe Bibby with the layup. And Maryland already up 9-0 just 3 minutes of the ball game. Texas with a timeout, and they regroup after that timeout. Nice feed inside to Charlie Collier here, who lays in and gets the Longhorns on the board. Later in the quarter, this one kicked out. Joanne Allen-Taylor from the corner for three, and the Maryland lead is down to 3. However, the Terrapins would lead by 7 at the half. Texas looking second half start on the right note, and they do there as Audrey Warren makes the floater. And then outside, Joanne Allen-Taylor for 3. She made 3 of those on the night. Longhorns now only down by 1. Texas on a 7-0 run here, but Laisha Stiles underneath. Her only bucket of the night, but it was a big one to stop the run for the Longhorns. Texas right back down the other end of the court. Charlie Collier going to work in the paint, and she puts the Longhorns back up 44-43. And then Diamond Miller, Maryland's star player, she had 21 on the night. A spinning layup there, 47-46. Then now in the fourth, inside, Collier, yes ma'am, ties it right back up at 52. And then Allen-Taylor, it won't go. Collier with her teammate at her feet, gets it and the foul. She makes the free throw and the Longhorns lead by 1. Then Celeste Taylor with a cold-blooded jumper to tie it up. And then the steal by Lauren Ebo and Kyra Lambert down the floor, uncontested, to give the Longhorns a 61-59 lead. Diamond Miller with the late layup there, but it's just a consolation as Texas stuns the 2nd-seeded Terrapins with a huge 64-61 victory. An incredible display by Vic Schaefer's team. Now joining me to discuss this monumental victory by the Longhorns in their first Elite Eight appearance since 2016 is Clark Dalton. Clark, welcome in. How you doing tonight?
I'm doing great tonight. Got to give a huge little applause there for the Texas Longhorns getting into the Elite Eight.
For sure, Clark. Just an incredible performance. But kind of looking at the game as a whole, Texas didn't start off well. They were down that 9-0 hole early on. But they came back, found a way to win. What was the key to this Texas victory?
The key to this Texas victory was an outstanding defensive effort. In the first round, Maryland scored 98 points, and in the round of 32, they scored 100 points. So that begged the question of how do you stop an offensive juggernaut like Maryland? But Texas was smart because they exposed something teams like Maryland who run that really up-tempo style of basketball, always getting out in transition, always running the floor. They have a small flaw in the NCAA tournament, which is half-court offense. They don't run it as well because they don't run it as many sets during the season. They're not used to playing that slow-down style of ball. And it nearly got away from Texas, but they were able to wrangle it back in early, and then they started to make sure that Maryland didn't get out in transition, had to run their offense. And when the Terrapins started to tire down, they made mistakes, and Texas capitalized on those opportunities, and that allowed them to pull away.
Yeah, for sure, Clark. It was definitely a team victory to pull off this upset, but kind of looking on the individual players now, who stood out to you in this Longhorn victory?
We always talk about Charlie Collier on this network, and she is an awesome player. But it's like I said on Press Box and Crossfire earlier this year, this Texas team won't become great until other players step up and live up to their potential. That happened last night with Kyra Lambert and Celeste Taylor. You got to understand, this tournament is and always has been about elite guard play. You can see it on this play right here. This is just smart basketball from Kyra Lambert to have the presence of mind to immediately go. Once she gets her hands on the ball and race for the layup, that was a moment in this game where you said Texas is going to win it, and they just want it more. And this was a really important game for Celeste Taylor because she came in with a lot of hype 2 years ago. But one thing people were always critical of with her is sometimes she wasn't the most aggressive player. But when Charlie Collier was having trouble last night, and it's not like Charlie Collier didn't play well. She had 16 points, but she didn't go out and have 31. You needed someone else to step up and be aggressive. That's what Celeste Taylor did. And that's what you need great guards to do in this tournament. And for her to knock down a couple of clutch threes, it's going to give her confidence moving forward. And it's going to give the entire team confidence and give them a good chance to have a great showing tomorrow against South Carolina.
For sure, Clark. It's already been a remarkable run for this Longhorn team, seeded sixth seed by the NCAA. Now they're in the Elite Eight. What is the ceiling for this Texas team? How far do you think they can go in the tournament?
That's a tough question, Adam. I think they can beat South Carolina. I don't know if they will. This is a really good South Carolina team they're facing. This is the number 1 seed in their region. They've won 25 games. But I will say this game isn't necessarily about winning tomorrow, but it's about going the distance and showing you can hang with the best teams in college basketball. And that's what this whole season has been about. Because really, over the past 2 seasons, when you think about it, and this is kind of all Texas sports in general, the narrative has always been they have the talent, but they can't win the big games always. And this year, they've been doing that in the NCAA tournament with strong performances from Charlie Collier, from Celeste Taylor, from Kyra Lambert. And that's really important because that leads to the building of a culture. That leads to a whole culture change because it shows that the work is being put in. And it may not be this year. It may not even be next year. But down the line, there are going to be recruits who are watching this game and seeing that the narrative that Texas can't win in the big games is simply not true. And eventually, those kids who are being recruited by UConn, who are being recruited by Stanford, who are being recruited by Baylor are going to look at Texas and say, they're building something, and I want to be a part of it. And that can lead to a championship win down the line. And the future of this program is great. And that's why you have to thank this team so much for everything they've given to this program this year.
Well, thank you for joining us, Clark. It's definitely going to be fun seeing the Longhorns go up against elite opposition in South Carolina tomorrow night. But when we come back, it'll be time for a Red River Rivalry Showdown on the diamond as the Longhorns went head-to-head against the Oklahoma Sooners this weekend. Don't go anywhere. You're watching College Press Box. Welcome back into College Press Box. Texas is currently ranked 5th in the nation in baseball. But as you know with rivalry games, you might as well throw the record book out the door. Oklahoma came into this weekend with a 12-8 record and had won 6 out of its last 7 as it came into Austin to square off with the Longhorns. Here we go at Dish Falk Field. Ty Madden on the mound for the Longhorns, but it's the Sooners who get off to a quick start. Jimmy Crooks hitting one down the right field line. Peyton Graham advancing to third. Runners on first and third, no outs. And then the wild pitch gets away, and that allows Graham to come home and score. And the Sooners strike first. 1-0 top of the first. Still in the top of the first, Tyler Hartman finding a gap. He drills down into the left center, and Crooks is going to come around to score to put the Sooners up 2-0. But now here come the Longhorns. Zach Zubia nails that one, and you can say goodnight to it over the wall and straight away center field. 2-1, and the Longhorns back in it. Still in the second, Mitchell Daly down the left field line. Trey Fulton rounds third, and he comes home. And just like that, we have a tie ball game in Austin. The Longhorns don't stop there. Next up, Douglas Hodo the third takes one to left field. Daly coming around third on his horse, and he'll get into home safely. Texas with 3 runs at the top of the second to retake a 3-2 lead. Ty Madden in trouble here. The runners first and second, 1 out. But he gets Tanner Trunaway to ground into a huge double play. Longhorns still up 3-2. Now Tanner Witt on the mound. A pitch gets away from him. It's Jimmy Crooks for the Sooners who comes around. Tie game yet again, 3-3 in the top of the 8th. Now all the way in the bottom of the 11th. Douglas Hodo to center field, and here comes Mitchell Daly. Rounding third, the throw comes in from center field. It's not going to be in time, and the Longhorns walk it off against their arch rivals, the Oklahoma Sooners. They win it 4-3 in 11 innings. A huge victory there for Texas. And now joining me in our virtual studio tonight is our baseball analyst, Jason Kinander. Jason, welcome in. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, Adam. Happy to be here.
For sure. And look at this Texas team, Jason. Since opening the season with 3 straight losses, Texas has now won every single series since then. Jason, what's been the key to this Texas Longhorns hot streak?
Well, Adam, it kind of goes without saying, but the best baseball teams are the ones in which good hitting complements good pitching. So, in other words, Texas's bats have a tendency to show up when the pitching hasn't been up to par, and vice versa. When the pitching has struggled, the bats have come in and carried a lot of the weight. So, I mean, it's kind of obvious that good teams need both good pitching and good hitting, but the key to this Longhorns team has been next man up mentality. When the pitching hasn't been good, the hitting has been good. When the hitting hasn't been good, the pitching's been good. But both have been good enough to win so many games on this hot streak.
For sure, Jason. And kind of talking about the pitching there, we saw Ty Madden on the hill for that big game on Friday. He's kind of been one of the biggest stars on the diamond so far for Texas this season. He's a projected first-round pick. How important has Madden been to the Longhorns this season, and where can we potentially see him drafted at the MLB draft in June?
Well, you know what, Adam? It's already been established that the best athlete on campus is Charlie Collier with the amazing run put together by the women's basketball team. But the best men's athlete on campus is not a football player, not a basketball player, but it's Ty Madden. Madden had an incredible start to last season before the cancellation. He's picked up right where he's left off. This season, he started 6 games. He has a 1.83 ERA, and he struck out a whopping 50 batters in 39 innings pitched. Madden's a lefty, has a hard fastball, good breaking ball, good changeup, all 3+ pitches that he can get outs with, can strike batters out with, and that's what's making him such a hot commodity for the MLB draft. College arms are very, very important, especially when you consider that they don't take nearly as long to develop. Madden looks MLB ready. He looks the part. When you see him take the mound, his poise, his posture, he looks like somebody who next week could take the mound at Dodger Stadium. So I would not be surprised at all to see Madden go in the top 10. And I'm actually going to say right now, the highest drafted men's athlete will not be a basketball player, will not be a football player, but it's going to be Ty Madden.
Big claims there from Jason. Definitely setting some high hopes for Ty Madden, but it would be great to see another Longhorn star in the major leagues. But following this weekend's series win over Oklahoma for Texas, the Longhorns have a big rivalry game coming up against Texas A&M, but then there's a little bit of an easier stretch of the schedule coming up. You have a 3-game series against Kansas, dates against Stephen F. Austin and Texas A&M Corpus Christi, and then another 3-game series against Kansas State. Jason, what can we expect out of the Longhorns in these upcoming weeks?
Well, aside from Tuesday's game against Texas A&M, it might be a pretty long time before this team loses again. After the rough weekend stretch where they ended up winning 2 out of 3 games, for that matter, against Oklahoma, the Longhorns are going to be rewarded with a fairly easy stretch of games. Their next difficult opponent isn't until they face off against Oklahoma State on the weekend of April 23rd. Series against Kansas, Kansas State, Nevada, Stephen F. Austin. Texas can win all of these games, especially if the bats continue to hit how they have. Cam Williams and Zach Zubia have been incredible in the middle of the order. If Madden can keep throwing the way he has, I don't think that this Texas team can be stopped. I think that Texas can continue to win games, pick up momentum, and what this team needs to learn is how to win games on consecutive days, how to win games throughout a stretch of a week. Because once you reach the regionals and the College World Series, anything can happen. The best teams are the ones that are battle-tested, they're consistent in their games, and obviously the ones that hit long home runs and strike out many batters. And that's what this Texas team has done. So high hopes for this squad in the coming weeks, Adam.
Well, thank you for joining us, Jason. It'll be definitely interesting to see if any of those upcoming games end up becoming trap games for the Longhorns. Like you said, well, to see if they can string together victories, because it seems like in some of these 3-game series, it's a drop game here or there that's preventing some sweeps. But when we come back, Marcus is going to recap the NBA trade deadline for us. Houston fans, you might want to look away, but don't go anywhere. You're watching College Press Box. Welcome back into College Press Box. With the trade deadline last Thursday, it was a busy week in the NBA. Now joining us for Unhooked is Marcus Risen to help recap the trade deadline chaos.
Thanks, Adam. With March Madness in full swing, it's easy to forget that we also have an NBA season going on. With the trade deadline all but behind us, I'm here to give a quick summary of all the moves of the eventful day that gave us 16 trades in the busiest deadline in history. While some teams made moves to hopefully put themselves into title contention, others made questionable moves that might come back to bite them. I'm talking to you, Rockets. We'll start with the biggest trade of the deadline. The Magic finally trade Nikola Vucevic along with Al Aminu to the Bulls for Wendell Carter Jr., Otto Porter Jr., and 2 first-round picks. In a decision that should have been made ages ago, the Magic have finally decided to part ways with the All-Star center and got a decent payout in return, with a younger center in Wendell Carter and a veteran in Otto Porter. For the Bulls, they get a star big man to pair alongside Zach LaVine and look like a lock for the playoffs now, as Vooch and LaVine should be a nice pairing going forward. Vucevic is one of the most underrated players in the league, mostly due to him being in Orlando, but is a versatile big who can shoot, post up, and is a decent defender. I'd be excited if I was a Bulls fan. However, the Magic weren't done there, as they also traded their second and third best players. Evan, don't Google his last name, Fournier, to the Celtics for only 2 seconds, and Aaron Gordon to the Nuggets for Gary Harris, RJ Hampton, and some draft picks. Starting with the Fournier deal, the Celtics seemingly gave up nothing to get a guy who scores 20 points a game. An absolute steal if you ask me. The only problem I see is that you're going to have to pay Fournier in the offseason, which won't be an easy price. As for the Nuggets, they get a guy oozing with potential in Aaron Gordon, and pairing him with Nikola Jokic seems to be a perfect pairing. I'm incredibly excited to see Gordon in any jersey other than the Orlando uniform, and Denver seems to be a great spot for him. I can't wait to see Jokic throw more lobs to him to the slam dunk maestro, who's essentially a better version of Jeremy Grant from last year. Keywords last year. For the Magic, they get a nice young point guard in RJ Hampton and a nice veteran in Gary Harris. Overall, a positive deadline for Orlando, as they needed a restart. And now they have a nice direction towards a rebuild around Fultz, Bamba, Wendell Carter, Cole Anthony, and Hampton, among other people. Now, the other trade that many people are talking about is the absolute robbing of Victor Oladipo from the Houston Rockets, as the Miami Heat gave up former Longhorn Avery Bradley, Kelly Olynyk, and a pick swap for the future All-Star, or former All-Star. Let's start with the good. The Miami Heat basically gave up nothing for a guy who can shoot, defend, and play make extraordinarily well in Oladipo. Plus, this is the place that he wanted to go in the first place, so they should retain him when he becomes a free agent this offseason. Yeah, they lose some front court depth in Olynyk, but in all honesty, I think the Heat would much rather have Oladipo than Olynyk right now. Now let's talk about the dumpster fire of the league, the Houston Rockets. I'm a Rockets fan, so I'm allowed to say that. The Rockets absolutely lost his deadline, and this season as a whole, as they gave up James Harden for ultimately nothing, as the biggest prize of that trade, Victor Oladipo, was essentially given up for 2 aging veterans who more than likely won't be on the team next year. They absolutely made the wrong decision when it comes to Harden, as they could have had Karis LeVert and former Longhorn Jared Allen, but instead decided that they wanted Oladipo and traded them both in exchange for the guy who was on a 1-year deal in the first place. Now LeVert and Allen are striving in their new situations, and the Rockets just ended their 20-game losing streak a couple days ago. Anyway, you guys don't care about the Rockets as much as I do, but just know that they lost the season, and hopefully we'll receive Cade Cunningham in exchange for it. Another big trade that was kind of questionable was the Toronto Raptors trading Norman Powell to the Portland Trailblazers for Gary Trent Jr. and Rodney Hood. The Trailblazers trade a guy in Gary Trent Jr. who's 22 years old for a guy who's basically Gary Trent Jr. but 27 years old in Norman Powell. I don't understand this move for the Blazers going forward. Trent was the one young guy that they could have built around in the future. Instead, they trade for Powell, who has a player option this summer that he'll definitely decline, making him an unrestricted free agent. They could potentially lose the guy they traded Trent for. And if I'm a Blazers fan, I'm praying Powell stays. Now, this isn't anything against Norman Powell. I mean, the man is averaging 20 points a game this season. It's just that Trent has the potential to be better than Powell in a Trailblazers uniform. Yes, Powell is currently better than Trent, but I wouldn't have risked it, especially since there's a possibility Powell leaves in the offseason, while Trent is a restricted free agent that the Bulls could have matched any offer for. As for the Raptors, I love this trade. They get a younger version of Powell and Trent that should be a good trio partner of Pascal Siakam and Fred VanVleet alongside OG Anunoby. The Raptors are near a rebuild, and Powell just wasn't fitting that timeline. Speaking of not fitting in a timeline, Kyle Lowry is still a Raptor and wasn't traded, a move that most fans thought would happen. Lowry's a free agent this offseason and will likely leave Toronto for a winning scenario, like the Philadelphia 76ers. The last big name trade was the swap of Rajon Rondo and Lou Williams. Rondo to the Clippers and Lou Williams to the Hawks. The Clippers finally get a floor general in Rondo, who should be a great playoff player for this team that has proven to might not have what it takes in the playoffs without good leadership. Lou Williams to the Hawks was quickly met with retirement rumors, as Lou has said that if he were traded from LA, he would retire. However, it looks like that was a lie, and Lou should be suiting up for the Hawks pretty soon. A nice veteran scorer off the bench on a team that might be surprising in the playoffs. Now, since I don't have all day, and trust me, I could talk about this all day, I'll speed run the rest of the less meaningful deals. The Pistons trade Delon Wright to the Kings for Corey Joseph in 2 seconds. The Cavs trade JaVale McGee back to the Denver Nuggets for Isaiah Hartenstein in 2 seconds. The Wizards trade Troy Brown Jr. and Mo Wagner to the Bulls for Daniel Gafford and Chandler Hutchinson. The Heat trade Mo Harkless and Chris Silva to the Kings for Nemanja Bjelica. The 76ers get George Hill and Iggy Brasdeikis, who they've since released. The Thunder get Tony Bradley and Austin Rivers, who they since have released, and 2 Philly second-round picks. And the Knicks get Terrence Ferguson, who I believe they released. The Celtics trade Daniel Tice to the Bulls for Mo Wagner, who was already traded this trade deadline. And finally, the Pelicans trade JJ Redick and Nico Melli to the Mavs for James Johnson, Wes Iwundu, and a second-round pick. All in all, I'd say the biggest winners of the deadline are the Bulls and the Heat. Both get all-star centers that go along with Zach LaVine, and the Heat traded a bag of chips to get Victor Oladipo. There's definitely the Houston Rockets, and I'll leave it at that, as Unhooked isn't a 30-minute segment. Anyway, what a trade deadline this was, as the league is completely shook now. I can't wait to see the finish. Back to you, Adam.
Thank you, Marcus. As a fellow Houstonian, I'll be going to get my fire extinguisher, and maybe we can put out the dumpster fire that is the Houston Rockets together. But thank you for definitely recapping the chaos that was the NBA trade deadline for us. But when we come back, it's back to the 40 acres as we recap everything going on in the world of Texas sports. Don't go anywhere. You're watching College Press Box. For the final time this evening, welcome back into College Press Box. There was plenty happening on the 40 acres this weekend, so it's time to get caught up on everything Longhorn related. First up, on the basketball court, maybe the most shocking development of the week. After his Longhorns were shocked by Abilene Christian in the first round of the NCAA tournament, Shaka Smart decided to accept the head coaching position up at Marquette. Smart departs the Longhorns after 6 seasons in charge. He leaves the Longhorns with an 109-86 overall record. He did, however, have a Big 12 tournament title this past year. However, when it came to March, there was plenty of heartbreak in the postseason. A half-court shock by Northern Iowa knocked the Longhorns down in 2016. In 2017, the Longhorns blew a double-digit lead against Nevada. And then the shocking loss to Abilene Christian this past weekend means the Shaka finishes with an 0-3 record in NCAA tournament games. He'll look to turn things up around in Wisconsin at Marquette after the Golden Eagles finished this season 13-14. Next up is time to go to the softball field, where the Longhorns hosted the Bevo Classic this past weekend with Ut Arlington, UTSA, and South Dakota taking part in the round-robin play. The Longhorns started the weekend with a remarkable comeback as they scored 5 unanswered runs in the 6th inning against South Dakota. Lauren Burke brought home the winning 2 runs on a sacrifice fly, and after an errant throw, that allowed the Longhorns to take a 6-5 lead that they would hold on to in the 7th inning. Next down up was a showdown against UT Arlington. The Longhorns took down 2-1. Mackenzie Parker hit into a fielder's choice in the 7th inning that allowed a run to score and gave the Longhorns a lead they wouldn't relinquish. Then against UTSA on the same day, they won 8-0. Shannon Rhodes hit 3 homers as the Longhorns dominated the Roadrunners. And then finally, Texas finished up a perfect weekend with a 9-1 win over UT Arlington. 10 different Longhorns had a hit in that one. And with 4 straight wins, Texas is now 24-3, heading into a 3-game series against Texas Tech this weekend. Now we're going to take a jump into the pool where Texas men's swimming and diving team continues dominance in the sport with its 15th national title this past weekend. Texas has now won 5 of the past 6 titles, in the sport, dating back to 2015. Again, the championships were canceled last year due to COVID-19. At the meet this year, Texas finished with 595 points, which is 27 points ahead of second place, California. However, a bombshell was dropped today after head coach Eddie Reese announced that he'll be retiring after 43 years at the helm and 15 national titles. He'll hold his position until the Tokyo Olympics. Wyatt Collins, an assistant coach under Reese, will take over as the interim head coach. Now time for some volleyball. Texas volleyball suffered a shocking loss to Rice midweek, but the Longhorns bounced back up in Waco on Friday with a 3-1 victory over the Baylor Bears. Logan Eccleston led the way with 15 kills, while Breon Butler had 12 blocks, and Jenna Gabriel had 44 assists for the Longhorns. Texas will close out its regular season with 2 games up in Fort Worth against TCU this Thursday and Friday. Now time for some soccer. Texas women's soccer team recorded its 2nd straight victory with a 3-0 win over Texas A&M Corpus Christi this past Friday. After a scoreless first half, goals from Julia Grosso, Mackenzie McFarland, and Cameron Burks secured the win for the Longhorns as they outshot the Islanders 28-5 on the night. Next up for Texas is a trip up I-35 to Waco on Wednesday, where they'll square off against the Baylor Bears. Last time these 2 teams met, Texas took it 1-0 back on October 30th. And now on to the tennis court. Texas women's team also picked up a victory with a convincing 7-0 win over number 7 Baylor. Texas took the doubles point before Kylie Collins, Peyton Stearns, Anna Tarati, Lulu Sun, Malaika Rapolu, and Fernanda Labrania all recorded victories for the Longhorns. Texas will be back in action tomorrow against Texas State. And after a busy past week, we have another busy week in Texas sports coming up. It's time to look at this week in Longhorn sports. As mentioned, Texas women's tennis has their match against Texas State tomorrow. Baseball travels over to College Station for a Lone Star showdown against the A&M Aggies. And then a huge Elite Eight showdown between the number 6 seed Texas Longhorns and the number 1 seed South Carolina Gamecocks at 6 o'clock on ESPN tomorrow. Then on Wednesday, women's soccer will make that trip up I-35 to take on Baylor. Well, men's tennis will be in action against Lone Star rivals Texas A&M. Then on Thursday, volleyball will look to bounce back from that loss against Rice. They'll look to keep the momentum going after that win against Baylor when they take on TCU on Thursday. And then again on Friday up in Fort Worth. Softball has a game against Texas Tech on Thursday at 6 p.m. on Longhorn Network. Women's basketball, they can have a potential Final Four game on Friday if they can take care of the Gamecocks. Women's tennis will square off against Houston at 3 p.m. on Friday. Softball has another game against Texas Tech on Friday, and baseball will make the trip up to Lawrence, Kansas. And then, hopefully not jinxing it, could the 6-seeded Longhorns make an improbable run to the national championship? If they do, that game will be on Sunday, April 4th. That would be one heck of an Easter Sunday. But for tonight, that's all we have for you on College Press Box. Make sure to tune in on Wednesday at 9 o'clock for College Crossfire with host Jaxie Pigeon for the best sports debate on the 40 acres. And wake up on Friday morning as well with the 1-0 Sports Show to get you ready for this weekend's sports. Could a Longhorn Final Four appearance be on the discussion? We'll have to see. But for tonight, for everyone in Master Control and in virtual studio, I'm Adam Ogburn. Have a great rest of your night.